It's time to, ready to pop that on.
There it is.
All righty.
We're recording, everybody.
All right. So yes, if for the most part, I don't see anybody but Jan, Patty, and myself right now. Mike, your name's up there, and Diane, I see you on. So if you don't want your video on, we will be recording this and putting this recording out on our YouTube channel. So if anybody does not want their face on video, please turn off your cameras. So I just wanted to introduce, my name is Susan M. Hart-Servideo from the Rutgers Cooperative Extension in Ocean County. And with me is Patty Dixon, also from RCE of Ocean County, and Michael Alvarado, who is a president of the Garden State Daily Growers. And that is also who is sponsoring Jan Sachs and Marty Schaefer with our Iris talk tonight. So again, I'm going to turn off this poll in a minute or two here, get that going. And then Jan, I'm going to, I'm really bad at reading so I'm gonna let you introduce yourselves. I got sidetracked. Yes. So welcome, Jan and Marty.
Okay, you ready for us to go?
You can go. Yep.
Okay. Well, Marty and I have been iris growers since the
1985.
Early 1980s. And I think we're gonna do a little
Pictorial introduction.
Okay, now why isn't that going? That would be, there you go.
There you go.
All right.
We just found out that one of our mice controls the picture
in a way that we didn't know.
In a way we didn't know.
Anyway.
That you can advance and
Okay.
reverse the slides. So
okay,
here goes.
Here we go. So we thought we would just start by introducing ourselves by showing you some photos from our garden. We grow all kinds of irises.
And all kinds of plants.
These are some shade-loving native irises, which we'll look at in a second. We like incorporating our irises with all of the other plants that we grow. We grow bearded irises, we grow little tiny species irises, and we grow Siberian irises, which is the one right in the center of your photo, all together in the garden. We don't, when we first joined the Iris Society, there were people who would have their bearded iris garden, and then they would have their
everything else
garden. We like putting all of our irises together in the garden with other things. So that's that. We're gonna take all right. Now, okay, there we go.
Gonna take a quick trip through the vast diversity of irises. Irises comprise 310, the last I heard, species.
So
they're finding new irises on different mountains in China, like every year. So we're just going to give you an idea of the range of sizes and qualities of some of these irises.
Huge genus, little tiny flowers, giant flowers.
This is Iris tectorum.
Iris tectorum. This guy is just a little Iris minutoria from
Korea
and China. We're going to make things extremely simplistic. The world of irises can kind of be divided into three groups. There are bulbous irises, which you're looking at right now.
This is an Iris reticulata, either hybrid or species. Dutch irises are in here.
So these are all the irises, and there are short ones and tall ones that grow from bulbs. The rest of the iris world is rhizomatous. I remember when I first heard that word, I thought it was funny. The rest of them grow from rhizomes. So, and these are two groups that we're going to just very simplistically, there are the bearded irises.
Which are more familiar to most people.
And what you're looking at right now is a bearded iris, and this thing right there is the beard. And mostly, when I first got into irises and didn't know what I was doing, I thought the beards were the source of pollen for irises. Not true at all. The pollen is way under here inside the thing. This beard is the plant's strategy for announcing where the pollen is and where the nectar is and what they need to do to get pollinators to come and pollinate them. Bearded irises come from very large rhizomes, big
Enlarged stems, basically.
large stems, and they tend to grow their rhizomes very close to the surface or pretty much right on top of the surface. The other irises we're going to look at, and this is a large group, are the, well, beardless. So you can see who the more dominant group of irises is, the bearded and the beardless. And so you'll notice right here where you might find a beard on a bearded iris, you've got just smooth petal, but this big loud noise right here is what we would call
A signal.
a signal, and that's again an announcement to pollinators that this is the place that they want to go.
It's like a signal. It's like a landing path for an airplane. It's just the lines all go into the center of the flower.
This is where it is. And even though this is representing the whole group of beardless, this is a Siberian iris, and this is what the rhizome of Siberian irises look like. These are generally smaller, tighter, much different from bearded irises, and you would want to grow them with the rhizomes about at least an inch, maybe 2 inches below the surface. Then we just thought we would throw in, because one of our favorites, Iris cristata. This is another beardless iris, but because it has these extra little
Raised ridges, which are called crests.
which are called crests, hence Iris cristata.
So they serve the function of attracting the pollinator into the center of the flower.
And Iris cristata has rather small rhizomes that kind of creep across the top of the soil with very fine roots.
Which are hardly attached. You can just pick them right up. They just skate over the ground.
You wonder how they manage to grow so well, but they do make really nice mats. And even though they're growing right on the surface of the soil, in a natural habitat, they would be covered by
leaf litter and compost and all that
and
stuff.
stuff like that. So it would be similar to this pine mulch that we get from our pine trees. And like that. And then because of a conversation I had with Susan the other night, I thought I would stick in an Iris insata. This is Iris insata, the species name, or a Japanese iris. And this is the rather simple species form.
As it occurs in the wild. And the Japanese gardeners and hybridizers have been selecting forms of Iris insata for 400 plus years now, maybe 425, but anyway, and they've made a lot of changes in this simple form.
So these are what we call more modern. I don't know how modern they are over 400 years, but anyway, this is what Japanese irises often look like in gardens. This is one form, and this is another form, more of the dinner plate type. And it can give you a little idea of what can be accomplished with hybridizing in irises, which is going to be our focus today, is to tell you about the hybridizing that we've done with Siberian irises. Siberians are our favorites.
Yes, they're great garden plants, great landscape plants. They assort well with all kinds of
for the
Other
perennials.
perennials,
Um,
especially.
and they make wonderful clumps. Even though tall bearded irises, which are sort of the queen of the whatever, the world in irises, Siberian irises can be very showy. They produce a lot more flowers per clump than a bearded iris does, and they really fit beautifully in the garden. We grow Siberians in as much sun as possible. Sometimes we've heard people talk about them as being shade loving, shade tolerant. The more sun you give them, the more they're going to bloom. They have a fairly wide tolerance of soils, from probably preferring slightly acidic, but can handle neutral soils, and I don't know about alkaline.
Maybe even a little bit.
Maybe a little bit of alkaline. They grow well in both sandy and clay soils, and what else?
And they like a fair amount of water, fair amount of fertility, but don't require either. They can, once they get established, they can resist most lengthy droughts. And we just fertilize them once a year, just a little sprinkling of organic fertilizer. So they're not heavy feeders.
Jan, I'm
So-
sorry, Jan and Marty, I'm sorry, that people are, somebody did mention that it's a little lag on some of the pictures, just to give you, so if you change quickly,
Change quickly.
don't
Okay.
change quickly, don't change quickly.
Oh, don't change quickly.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
If you
so-
can help, you're fine, but I'm just passing on.
that's fine. Okay. So we're going to show you some different Siberian clumps just to give you an idea of how much variation. We're really talking about heights of clumps here more than we're talking about colors, which we'll get into in depth. But there are some nice dwarfish Siberians that make nice front of the border clumps. There are medium-sized clumps, and
It's
there
about
are
20 inches, and this is about 36 inches.
quite tall clumps. So we love to emphasize how much variety there is in Siberian irises, not just in the flower colors that we're going to be talking about, but also in the types of plants.
Yeah.
And to that end, we're going to tell you, well, before we do that, we're going to talk about parts
Parts of an iris.
of the iris, just so everybody knows what we're talking about. We already told you about the signal area, but this whole structure here is called the fall. And everything in irises is parts of three. So there's 1, 2, 3 falls.
And there are 3 standards, which generally stand up,
Um,
especially in the wildflowers. And then
these
the other 3 structures are the style arm, which is actually where the stigmas, the female part of the iris,
Right
is
underneath.
located.
right
And
under
then
there.
under the stigmas, there are anthers, and there's a little post with an anther on top of it, under that style arm,
Which has the pollen.
which has the pollen.
So there we go. Parts of an iris. Okay. We're gonna try to give you an idea about where Siberian irises come from, which is from 2 species irises, Iris siberica, which this is an example of.
Siberica is actually not actually Siberian, but it is from Central Asia all the way to Central Europe. So it has a really wide range. And you get some variation in that range. And here's an example of a slightly darker one.
Okay.
But so you notice that
These are both Iris sibericas.
the format of Siberica is very vertical. The standards stand straight up, the falls fall straight down, and the style arms are almost horizontal to the ground. They have a little curve, but they're basically horizontal to the ground.
And also it's worth noticing the buds that you have here on Iris siberica, which we'll talk about in a second. So this is Iris sanguinea, which is the other of the 2 species that make up the modern hybrid Siberian. And it may look pretty similar to you, but it has slightly wider parts.
All the parts, the standards and the falls are both wider than the Siberica.
And
Brace yourself, because 6 lives.
okay, and you'll notice
For a limited time, get 3 upgrades dynasty by a platinum box.
All right. So this also, the coloring is a little different where we were over here and we see all this veining that we've got. On Sanguinea, you'll see more solid color. And when you look at this other picture of a Sanguinea in this darker purple, you'll notice one of the characteristics of Sanguinea is that it has very saturated, more saturated color than you find in Iris siberica. There are also white forms of Iris siberica and Sanguinea. This is the white siberica form.
It's sort of a skim milk white, sort of bluish white.
And has these little blue veins going up and down here where we had veins in the other. This is the Sanguinea white form. And you'll notice no veining, yellow.
A little bit yellow at the signal,
At
and it's more of a crystalline white. It's more of a opaque white.
Then the clump shape of these things is quite different. This is Iris sanguinea in a clump, and you'll notice all the flowers kind of sitting right on top of the foliage. The sanguinea species tend to have only 2 buds on each stalk, so there's a terminal bud and a second bud. And we're going to contrast that with Iris siberica's form, which is that it has, this is one single stalk going up and down. It has multiple branches and multiple buds, so you might have 3 flowers open on one stalk. And again, here with the same plant, you'll notice that all the flowers are well up out of the foliage and up above the plant. And this shows you the seed pods of these 2 species, which I always love seeing. Iris siberica seed pods are very
Tubby.
little tubby guys. The seeds look very similar, but the seed pods are quite different. And this is Iris sanguinea on the right. So those are the 2 wild species. In the early 1900s, people started bringing these 2 species into both Europe, Great Britain, and the United States, and people tried crossing them, and surprise, surprise, they crossed readily with each other. So in many later years, when people started counting chromosomes, they discovered that they both have the same number of chromosomes, which is 28, and they readily cross with each other. And maybe some taxonomists are out there thinking that they might actually be the same species, and so far that idea has been rejected, and we don't really care because they work together really well as hybrids. So this picture is of Gatineau, which was a very early Siberian hybrid made by crossing a Iris siberica by a white sanguinea. And this is an iris called Caesar's brother, which I assume a lot of you have heard of. I know a lot of people grow it, but it's quite an old iris. And when you look at this flower, you might say to yourself, oh, well, that looks just like an Iris sanguinea because it has all that, those jewel tones, the color, the
small light signal.
It just really seems like this is just an old sanguinea. But when you look at the clump and the plant in bloom, you'll see that it has very much the Siberica-like qualities of having tall stalks, multiple buds, and flowers well up out of the foliage. And that is the characteristic of the hybrid. It also gave it tremendous vigor to have 2 species in these early hybrids. And so there was a lot of breeding among those irises. Most of them were blue violet. and white.
And occasionally they found an iris like this that has sort of a rosy glow, rosy tone.
Rosy tone to it. And that's what they were working on pretty much for the first 50 plus years in the
In the 20th century.
20th century. And then there were three sort of big events in Siberian breeding. In 1957, Fred Caspier,
Who was a native New Jerseyan, by the way. He had, I can't remember where his garden was, but he grew a lot of seedlings, and out of them came this one. Very, very famous iris.
which is called White Swirl. And you'll notice in it, instead of the falls being pendant, they're flaring out here. And the standards, instead of being straight up in the middle of the flower, they're a little bit open in the center, probably because these style arms have gotten a little bit fancier and they're holding the standards down a little bit. But this was, people saw this and everyone got very excited about it, and they decided that this was a direction they wanted to go to
So all of mid-century hybridizers just use this with everything they could get their hands on.
The next big event happened in 1970, which was a hybridizer up on the coast of Maine named Currier McEwen made the first tetraploid Siberian by using colchicine and converting it. He had worked in daylilies where that was being done, and he tried it in Siberian irises, and it was a success. And there are many wonderful tetraploid Siberians on the market today. Marty and I only breed with the diploid Siberians. We're not, we don't work in tetraploids, but it's not to say that they aren't wonderful irises. And the third big event that happened, which was also done by Currier McEwen, though this is definitely a diploid, was the introduction of this iris, butter and sugar, which was the first yellow Siberian, light yellow Siberian. And it had light yellow falls and white standards. And
it was quite a sensation, and everybody started hybridizing with that too, because butter and sugar had a few faults that they thought could be improved upon. And so most of them started.
But we're not there yet.
Okay. Excuse
Okay,
me.
sorry, jumping ahead. Anyway, this is a picture we put together of 6 irises that were all top award winners in the mid 1980s, which is when Marty and I started hybridizing and growing irises. And what you'll see here, there's one pink one down here, probably the first pink that people recognized. The rest of them are all blue violet, though this one is a little bit bluer than anything that people had seen before. This one is a tetraploid, the others, it just gives you an idea of sort of the state of the height of Siberian accomplishments at that time in around the mid 1980s, which is the same time that we went out to visit an iris hybridizer who's on the right here, B. Warburton, and that's Marty in his youth on the left. And she had been a very prominent bearded iris hybridizer, an expert. She was the editor of the World of Irises, and she had just been breeding Siberians for about 10 or 15 years and was more than happy to impart all kinds of knowledge to us about breeding and Siberians and techniques and all kinds of other things, which some of which we used and some of which we evolved into our own techniques and ideas. And before long, Marty was out there making crosses with his reverse action tweezers, and we started growing seedlings. And this is
by the thousand.
a lot of seedlings. This was not at the very beginning. This is more like, I'd say this is probably more us in the mid 90s, but it's important for anybody who might consider hybridizing, I just would like to say that when we did our first bed of iris hybrids, iris seedlings from crosses that we made, they were maybe 30 seedlings. And so it's not required that you start in such huge numbers. It's just infectious. So it gets to you after a while. So the way things work for Marty and me, Marty does all the pollinating, and 90% of the decisions on pollinating. I do the photography and the record keeping, and together we do all the evaluation of seedlings. And so you'll see in this photo blue flags for things that are being rejected and will be dug out at the end of the year. And pink flags are messages to come take my picture, and green flags are things that have already been selected. The process of hybridizing irises is so exciting. In any given spring, you're getting up in the morning and walking out into your garden, and you're seeing flowers that no one has ever seen before. They're blooming for the first time just for you. And it is really, really fun and exciting. So whether you do it on a grand scale or a small scale, I would encourage everybody to think about it. It's so much fun.
That's not that hard.
Not that. We dug up an old photo from early on in our hybridizing of Siberian irises. That it's a funny looking photo because it's a scan of a slide. But you'll notice right away that all the flowers in this picture are pretty much blue and white. And if you really searched, you might find a pale yellow somewhere. But this is what our hybridizing looked like for a good long time at the beginning. And this is a picture of our hybridizing irises now. And so the color of irises in Siberians has changed dramatically. I'd say a tremendous amount of that change is due to Marty's really amazing decisions that he made over the years about what to cross with what. And we're going to try to tell you a little bit about how we got there from blue and white to all these new colors in Siberians.
So this was the first iris that we introduced. It was a cross of two of B. Warburton's, what I think of as the best, some of the best things that she produced. And one was blue and one was purple, and it made this red iris, which just goes to show you that you can't predict where you're going to get.
And this, probably was kind of the state of what we called red at the time in Siberians. It was definitely a wine red. And the other thing about this, when you see the cross of two named irises, it's very typical of young hybridizers to cross with named irises. And it really makes a difference as you're breeding to get into a stage where you start crossing with your own seedlings and not just think that you have to only cross with other people's named irises. This is another introduction early on for us. And Marty had started using some of B's seedlings. And also in that very early period, and again, this is a scan of a slide, we got this very strange looking Siberian iris. It was in no way pretty.
No, the flower is sort of awkward and twisted. The petals are, but the style arms just blew me away because they were upright, they were enlarged, they were blue, decorated with purple. It just seemed like a gift. So I crossed it with a lot of different things.
Thought it would turn into something wonderful.
And you're gonna see more of this. We're gonna follow some of the developments of this later on. We call it upright styles or up styles.
Or up styles. So we'll come back to it. This is one of the early children of upright styles. It's an iris called Careless Sally. We were really thrilled with the style arms on this. This is still quite early in our breeding, and they had gotten a lot fancier. So we did not get the absolute upright styles from the parent, but we did get some really pretty styles. Another thing that Marty was focused on as a young hybridizer was having seen that really pretty blue glow in swank that we showed you. He wanted to breed bluer blue irises, less blue violet, more blue. And he took Jaybird, which
Child of Swang.
Child of Swank, and crossed it with Forest McCord, which is a very good iris. And we got this one, which is Riverdance. And much to our surprise, it ended up being
A top award.
the top award winner in Siberians. It was bluer than anything people had seen before. And it also made a wonderful clump. And it's very important, always with hybridizing, that you're not just looking at the flower, but you're always looking at the clumps. You want to see something really vigorous, something maybe that looks a little different in the way it presents itself. But in any case, it should always be a good, strong, vigorous clump
And should display a lot of flowers.
and display a lot of flowers.
So back to butter and sugar. Everybody at the time, all the established hybridizers at the time, decided that the only way to get better yellows was to breed it with white. And so they were all busy breeding with white. And I had a different idea. I was going to breed it with all the best blues that B. Warburton's garden had available. So I crossed it with this great big plant, big flower called Percheron.
One of the problems with butter and sugar had been that it was a bit of a weak grower. It didn't have great bud count. The color was not as rich as maybe some people, as rich a yellow as some people could imagine that it might be. And so Marty just took this approach of breeding. You also bred things with whites and things that you imagine might be a little yellower, but he also bred things with blues, which turned out to be very important. Over
It only took a couple generations, but this Summer Rebels was sort of like the same color, maybe a little deeper than butter and sugar, but it had wider form and bigger flowers.
and stronger plant.
And a stronger.
And a stronger plant. And this is another one from several years later. We have introduced quite a lot of yellow Siberians over the time, and we'll tell you more about that in a little while.
So that's definitely a warmer color than butter and sugar, and it lasts better than the yellow butter and sugar. But one of the things that I had no idea was going to happen is that we're going to have flowers like this, where the yellow and the blue coexist in the same flower in a rather odd relationship. The flowers look kind of eerie or moody, and
we weren't at all sure what to make of this seedling, which we've always called 48-3. It was really a very good plant, but it was such an odd looking, it just had such an odd look. We never did introduce it, but you kept working with it because you thought it might be a door to some really wonderful things.
So the Siberian people did not like this iris. They thought it was not jewel toned. It was
not pretty.
Not pretty.
We had
bearded people, however, thought it was pretty nice. So
they were more used to things that were not just blue and white. So that was very interesting to us. Another thing you did early in your breeding was to
I wanted to find different sources of yellow. And when I saw this plant, which was introduced by a woman in Massachusetts, I saw the yellow buds, and I thought,
here,
even if it doesn't show in the front, there's got to be a source of yellow for another source of yellow besides butter and sugar.
and this was actually a pure Iris Siberica,
Pure iris.
with these wonderful blue lavender markings in the signal area. And that became an important part of your breeding. And this is one of our first seedlings from it, right?
This is,
yeah. So
it made a great plant. There's, as you can see there, it's just loaded with flowers and stems and just vigorous and very generous.
So we're going to kind of review what we call our blue over yellow breeding. One of the things that Marty started doing at the beginning when we saw these things, he gave them the name of overlays because it seemed as though there was a layer of blue pigment that was laying over a full layer of yellow pigment that went from not just in the signal, but all the way out to the edge of the flower. And we were kind of desperately trying to create things that we thought would be attractive enough to people to introduce. And this is one of our first ones called Uncorked. And we knew they were pretty weird, so we gave them some kind of extreme names. This was another one that we introduced that's definitely a blue over yellow or an overlay.
It's a little more attractive than Uncorked, perhaps. But we call it Here Be Dragons, and people really like this. As you can see, it bloomed a lot.
Really blooms a lot. And was really well received. And I think you could say that the Siberian people started sort of changing their mind about it. And then we got this iris. This is all from this process of breeding blue and yellow irises and getting these kind of eerie ones and then breeding them to yellows and breeding them back to blues.
And mixing in snow prints.
And mixing in snow prints for this one, very much so. This was the first bicolor Siberian. It was blue on the top and more or less yellow on the falls, and it produced wonderful clumps. It was a small flower, and in spite of that, it was really well embraced by the iris world, and we were very pleased to have it received so well. Then a child of Van Gogh, again, a tiny little flower. Marty thought, well, I got to make it bigger.
Yeah.
Little is really nice, but we got to see if we can get that pattern into bigger irises. And so he crossed it with the biggest
Nice light blue.
light blue we had in the garden at the time, which was called Mission Bay. And we got these irises, which really started making this overlay pattern look
More conventional.
more acceptable, not quite so eerie or weird. So there was theme and variation, Lime Street Blues, which again has some of that oddness of the overlay, but
it's very smooth.
yeah, worked together really well. And then this one, Art in Bloom. And a little later on, we started getting this pattern of the blue overlays so that the colors did start combining better and had less of that sort of ghostly look. But the fact that you see the yellow underneath in the signal area
It goes all the way to the edge.
and goes all the way out here to the edge is very much showing that this is still part of this overlay pattern. And then this is a seedling that we've been looking at lately. It's a very pretty iris and it may very well get introduced, but it's, if you look at it, you pretty much think that's just a regular old blue Siberian iris. But if you look at this, you'll see it came from an overlay. The picture up in the left corner, that's the two parents, an overlay blue by a yellow, and it produced all these different seedlings, each one of them wonderful blue, very odd.
Kind of a
Who
rainbow.
Who knows what coloring that is? Purples over yellow, blue violets over yellow, a little bit bluer. So what we're really getting now is a lot of going back and forth, including the really nice blues, from blue to yellow and back again. We also started finding this overlay pattern in other colors. So there was our old Careless Sally, which came from Upright Styles.
We had no idea that this was an overlay at the time it bloomed.
We were so excited about the style arms, we didn't even notice the yellow signal down here. It's really quite amazing you could be so dense. But anyway, we didn't see it. But it's quite a nice overlay of, and we never could come up with a really good description of what that color is.
Purple pink.
But Marty also was crossing with snow prints, that wonderful Siberica with the yellow buds, the white flower. And we got this iris, which we named after the woman that had introduced snow prints, Sarah Tiffany. And you can see again,
So that's sort of red violets that over yellow that sort of looks just like pinkish.
yeah, pinkish. But it was a very interesting and I thought beautiful iris. We also introduced Ginger Twist, which was a fabulously vigorous, tall,
And very floriferous.
very floriferous,
But still it's got that veining and dotting.
veining
that
and dotting from the red violet over
yellow.
yellow. And then finally, we got Humors of Whiskey, which we're going to come back to, but which we were thrilled with because the colors had combined
So
so
smoothly.
smoothly. And a real thought that, oh, maybe someday we'll go from golden brown to orange, who knows, in Siberians. Then in the world of pink, this was the standard for pink Siberians. When we introduced it in 1995, you can see the white signal underneath. There's no yellow under there at all. And the pink coloring was very lavender. And in time, as Marty crossed yellows into that kind of pink coloring or into other irises, produced this kind of pink coloring. And again, you can see that it's an overlay because of this yellow signal, even though the falls, the color combines pretty well. And again, here, another pink overlay,
So it's a lot warmer than the old
the
Flesh of
old
May
pink.
pink.
And this is one of our newest ones called Come With Me. And again, you're seeing the yellow underneath, and it goes a long way to giving you that really nice pink color.
Very smooth color.
Um,
I thought we all also worked on red, so you know what? Why not?
the standard of red at the time, this iris was introduced by Bob Hollingworth from Michigan in 1988. It was considered the reddest Siberian at the time because it was a much brighter wine red. It was brighter than our Devil's Dream. It was brighter than a lot of things, and it was a really beautiful iris.
It was very smooth and very intensely colored.
And at the same time, Marty was seeing in the seedlings some what we call red, and that's red in quotes, red over yellow. So you started seeing the yellow signal under these sort of mushy reddish irises. They were not beautiful. Here's another one. These were the two that really got us started. So
Cross them together, and we got this next iris.
and we got this, which was very exciting to us because it was quite a wonderful, different shade of red than we had seen before. And for some reason, you crossed this with a pink overlay from also different breeders in Michigan, right?
Yeah.
And from that cross, we got this wonderful iris, which we eventually named Miss Apple. And the first day this iris bloomed, we went running up to the garden and we collected a petal of Sultan's Ruby. And this is Miss Apple, and we compared them and took pictures on the ground. We weren't sure until we really got them together. We thought it was a new color of red, but it really turned out to be a wonderful new color of red. And if you look at this picture, this is just a picture of an iris with a fault, which is that it forgot to put all of its pigment down, but it gives you a little hint into the flower to understand that all this red here has this pigment, or well, some pigment over this color, which is all the way underneath everywhere. That's the overlay aspect of it. But in the reds, it really seemed as though the colors combined much better than they did in the blues.
I have no idea why.
So Miss Apple, again, turned out to be a very good, strong growing plant, made a good clump. and had wonderful color. And this was one of the first children of Miss Apple, which we called paprikash because of all the speckles. I would say this probably is the most vigorous iris we
That
have ever grown. It's just an extremely good grower. And so you crossed paprikash with this great big yellow called Solar Energy, which we'll get back to in a second, but this cross produced this wonderful deep red iris with a big yellow signal, which we called rubies on tap. And I think this is still one of the best reds we've seen in Siberians, and we're really pleased with it.
And just because it's what I do, I tried to find another source of red, and this source
Besides Miss Apple.
besides Miss Apple. So this does not have is not related to Miss Apple at all. So I did some crossing with it and came up with this beautiful thing, which is more saturated and seems like it has some. It's definitely a red overlay because there's the yellow signal, but also has the nice blue styles and
Had hints of red that made us think that there was red in there. Again, it was only a seedling. We did not introduce it. We didn't think it was good enough, but you crossed it again with that same yellow Solar Energy. And we got a wonderful cross of irises, and we can't even begin to show you all the wonderful seedlings that came from it. This was one sort of a pinkish rose, not what we were looking for in the way of red, but we were just thrilled with all these feathers and doodads on the style arms, which were very substantial and had edges and then had yellow on their edges and all kinds of things going on. We just thought that was great fun. We got this, which was a blue overlay from what we thought would be red breeding, and introduced this one as Dusky Dawn. And then we got this one, which eventually was introduced as Penelope Ann. It's a wonderful glowing red, in spite of the fact that there's blue in the style arms and some blue in the standards. The fall color is really spectacularly what we call new red. And so we were very happy with it. And now you had two sources of red, one from Miss Apple and one
from Penny.
From this first pomegranate punch going through to Penny, Penelope Ann.
So we're going to take a brief revisit to yellow, because yellow has been so important in developing all these colors. So my intention was to get deeper and deeper yellows to see if we could get deeper and deeper blues, reds, and pinks. So this is going to be a little view of yellow.
This is one of the seedlings that we got. This lovely light colored rim was sort of a bonus. We weren't really expecting it, but this is a very fine iris with great substance and has just been a fabulous breeder going forward, as well as a really good garden plant. And this is a child of Solar Energy, a fairly new one. Gives you an idea of where we're going now with yellow Siberians. They're really quite a bit more saturated color. This one still is white in the standards and styles, but has great color in the falls. Makes a wonderful clump, just a sort of a stocky barrel kind of clump.
Yeah.
And this is another recent yellow that we introduced called Melody in Motion. This is different. I mean, Cape Cod girls had very tailored simple form. This one is much more ruffled. And you'll also notice that the standards now have turned yellow and the styles have turned yellow. And so we have yellow selfs instead of just yellow falls with white tops. And so that's continuing. And it also makes a really fine clump with irises up and down throughout the clump and produces really a lot of bloom. This is a seedling that we've been looking at and evaluating. It's brand new. It's from our 2019 crosses.
Or 17. Any-
No, it's not. Yeah, well, whatever. It's a new seedling, and one of the things that we noticed about it is over here. You'll see,
A very orangey bud, and the orange actually appears in the falls also. Just
well, it appears,
it appears to my eye anyway.
yes,
As being orange.
right. And so Marty is imagining someday maybe he can get to orange through yellow. We will see. But just to give you an idea of how this is working out, that's the same seedling there. And you see it has two yellow parents, but the grandparents, there were 3 reds. And so these things are not like you're breeding yellow by yellow by yellow by yellow by yellow. We're getting reds from yellows and yellows from reds and blue over yellows
And they-
from
so it's-
red and
So it's
yellows. And,
complicated, and you can't just draw straight lines from point A to point B.
but
does-
it's also really fun to me
It's a
that
lot more
it's
fun.
it's coming and going like that. And so we're just going to show you a few of our other new yellow seedlings to give you an idea of what we're hoping to do. We feel like there are 2 purposes. One is that deeper yellow
would be try-
Siberians would be really pretty in the garden, but also
to have them improve or change the colors of the other iris, of the other colors.
if we get deeper and deeper yellows, we think we'll get more and more interesting other colors. Okay. And then the more traditional approach to orange, maybe through gold and brown. Remember, we were at Humors of Whiskey, which we imagined might someday lead to an orange. This is definitely in the sort of
Reddish
brown, pink area. Drink Your Tea, which is a smallish flower, but makes a fabulous presentation because it has very strong branching from Iris siberica and has flowers all up and down its stalk. And then we got Honeycomb Rock, which
goes back to the speckling and veining, but is an interesting color, sort of a rusty orange.
it had a child. It didn't have a child. Marty crossed it with something and got this child from it, which is Pixels at Dawn with little light speckles throughout, a very large flower with interesting coloring, which we have trouble describing what color it is. And then we have Fashion Forward, which we're sort of trying to imagine might be somehow in orange. We use an RHS color chart to try to find things, and they have the nerve to call these grade oranges, which makes me very unhappy, but we could not match it to anything, which was quite frustrating. And then we also have gotten Rounding Third, which we're thinking is kind of on the way, really getting close to on the way to orange. Though if you talk to a bearded iris hybridizer, they would say, that's not orange.
But it looks very orange in the sun.
In the sun, in the
Okay,
garden,
so
it glows orange in the clump. And then we got this iris, which is Carlisle Caper. Really a funny looking little iris that came from this parentage. So it's this dark purple by this
Yellow, rusty red.
and just for you to know, this iris, the purple, and this brown guy you can barely see up there, those were siblings from the same cross. So there is brown somewhere available in that purple. But it gave us Carlisle Caper, and we were surprised by the white style arms. We were amazed at the straw colored standards and the wonderful rusty falls. And Marty went bonkers crossing it with everything he could find in the garden to see what would happen. He crossed it with some bigger things and got this, which is a seedling we're evaluating. He crossed it with some smaller things and got this very wonderful color.
Not a very good flower.
We didn't not like the form of the flower or the plant, but you used it in breeding. So here, crossing it with another child of Carlisle caper, and came up with this seedling, which just bloomed last year for the first time. We're very excited about it. We're hoping it's going to be a good plant, but we don't really know until we have a chance to grow it on and see what it's going to do. We also, from Carlisle caper, got this lovely, we call it peach. We have a hard time describing colors
Sort of a reddish pink.
of these new colored Siberians. And then you took remember that rubies on tap, you took a really nice red child of rubies on tap and crossed it with Carlisle caper, not really expecting anything in particular. And we got two wonderful seedlings out of it, both of whom I named after my redheaded sister. This is Marjorie Magic, which is a sort of an orangey red. Makes a really lovely little clump. And then this seedling bloomed, and we were just absolutely blown away by the depth of the color, the velvetiness of the falls, the fact that there was no blue up here in the style arms and no blue in the standards. It's really the first iris that seemed to be really a complete red. And this is another view of it. And it's going to be, well, it was introduced this year as Will You Wear Red, which is a nursery rhyme that my sister and I used to sing together. And so, of course, Marty had to make many, many crosses with this Will You Wear Red over there on the right. So it was a very tiny flower, and he thought, well, let's cross it with some bigger flowers. And that's what you see here. This is the cross, this iris by this iris. And we have gotten this wonderful red seedling from it. Again, still being evaluated, but we love the quality of the red color that we get in the falls of this iris.
It's also made a really nice, very erect clump. The stalks are just wonderful.
So we have good hope for it, but it also has to get divided and lined out, and it has to like doing that as well. So we'll see. He also took Will You Wear Red and crossed it with that old rusty child of Carlisle caper, and we got these cute little flowers, each one really interesting, really different. These are all still just in the formative stages of being evaluated. We crossed it with this very deep yellow on the right and got this, again, little cute flower. Just nuts about this flower. The quality, I don't know if that's red or orange or what in the falls, but it's really, really pretty. And we'll see where that's going to go. And then one of the byproducts of breeding with all this yellow and red is that one day this iris bloomed back in probably 2010-ish.
Yeah.
And
It just came right out of the blue. There was no way to predict that this was even possible. Even when in my dreams, I never dreamed that I could
anything like this. It was not a good plant for introduction because it was too short, had a very big flower,
on a very short plant.
didn't grow well enough. And it had a sibling that we did introduce called Carnavalito, which I don't even try to describe either the color or the pattern of that fall, whether it's an overlay or I don't know what it is. And it's definitely an overlay but who knows? Anyway, it's a wonderful plant and is to us, it's a great example of what you're looking for in a Siberian. But on the breeding side, Marty was just nuts over this iris. I thought it was kind of excessively gaudy and wasn't sure I was all that excited about our going in that direction, but Marty was definitely clear that that's where he wanted to go. And I do have to say, eventually I've come on board with him. So he went around and crossed it with everything again in the garden. There are just certain flowers that show up that seem so interesting that you've got to explore them and find out what's there. And so he crossed this with theme and variation, and we got these seedlings. There were many in the cross, but these are the ones we selected to introduce: Purring Tiber and Follow the Honey. Still pretty gaudy, pretty different looking. There were nothing looking like this at the time in Siberians. And this one, which is both bright and gaudy,
yeah.
Juniper Lee, which
Very loud.
really, really loud. And a child of Juniper Lee, which is a little toned down, very large flower, really pretty. That's a new iris this year. Then still back at the time when that what we call 16-2, that was the breeder, was around, you made a cross with it by something and got this seedling, which again was not going to be introduced because it wasn't a good plant, but the flower was so extreme. And we had a friend who walked in the garden and said,
That looks like a psychedelic.
so we always called it psychedelic
Psychedelic tie.
tie. And you used it for breeding and have created this seedling, which is
Look at those red style arms.
under evaluation.
So-
Great contrast of the style arms and the pale standards and the falls.
You cross that with another similar colored flower.
From Juniper Lee. And you got this
Okay.
very surprising result of,
Well, so this is just a very pale red with a little bit of veining, and I call it a ghost red, which I can't think of a more appropriate name for it.
So-
But you can see that the siblings in the background have
up here.
the same pattern as the parents.
And
But
so,
somehow this guy missed the message.
and didn't get most of the red
Most of the
coloring.
color.
And we just thought it was unique and interesting and needed to do something with it. But at the same time, we had gotten this much more traditional looking,
Large signal
large signaled thing
from 16
from 16-, yes. And we named it Fiddles on Fire and crossed Fiddles on Fire with our very, very red Penelope Ann. And we got this iris, which we thought, oh my goodness, this was really a surprise. We had no idea that a Siberian would ever look like this. And it again, I don't know, we call it a semi-ghost red, because it's basically a red over yellow, but not with the full amount of pigment. And so Marty could not, and here's the Fools in Love in a clump, which is just a beautiful clump. But then Marty took Fools in Love and crossed it with the ghost red. And these are the seedlings that we got from it. And again, these are things that have not been seen yet in Siberians. It's just amazing. And I'm just going to run through the seedlings from this cross. Every one of them we were excited about. And we have still a long time to go to evaluate them, but they were just wonderful. And to me, this just epitomizes what fun you can have hybridizing irises, whether they're Siberians or some other kind of irises. They're wonderful to do. And I have a little ways to go. Susan, shall we keep going?
It's
Yeah, I
8:02.
forgot I was muted. We could go on for a few more if you would like. I am going to put the poll up for in case we start losing. So let me put the poll up for how you like the talk. You guys can go through. You can move the
Right.
poll off your screen once that comes through. Let me pull this. one.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull it up. Come on. Oh, it's giving me the other one.
Okay. Well,
Nope,
while
you go ahead and go, and I'll
that.
just.
we want to talk kind of at the end, almost the end, about style arms, because we talked about them at the beginning with our excitement about upright styles. And We want to show you a little bit more about what's happened in style arms since 30 years ago. All right, so.
This is
So
just to remind you what style arms look like in the wildflower. They're very horizontal, they're small,
straight.
and
um,
yeah, and
simple.
not very adorned, very simple.
Not that this isn't a wonderful iris, because this is one of my favorite Siberian irises, even though it's back from 1935. Summer Sky is a great iris. But we're going to look a little bit about how fancy style arms have gotten, can get.
So this is the style arm has grown in width, and it has the same contrast, but has the same color as Summer Sky, but has it built on a contrast of a very deep purple.
So there are
balls.
a lot of ways that style arms can be decorative. This Bluebird Kisses is, what did we decide?
It's the 5th generation from upright styles. And so it's got the upright styles, but they're not as wide as upright styles, where they also have the very nice petal-like structures
Curls.
at the end of
Curls
the
on them
styles.
and way prettier than it was. And then we're just going to show you a few, these are seedlings. Just take in the style arms and see how pretty, decorative, wild you think they are. We're getting some with little curls and flips on the ends, all kinds of things. They've gotten
They're becoming very petaloid.
wider petaloid, diamond shaped instead of straight. This one has upright styles that are quite long in the center of the flower, with a white flush, which makes them very decorative. And this is one of our seedlings. It's got brown tips on the style arms, and we're just totally surprised and not befuddled, but we found it amusing, I guess you'd have to say. Very cute. And then these are style arms.
Is this going over the line? Is this style arm development going over the line?
We kind of thought this was a step too far. This was the early years. Now it's maybe gotten
It's settled down a little
bit, but it's pretty wild. And we're really having a sort of a discussion about whether we really want to go there with this. We've had people encourage us to pursue it, and we're just not sure. But here are a couple of more where
the structures are similarly sized, but they're more organized and less
and you
goofy.
See that here with the upright styles and the curls, and then you add veins in the standards and veins in the falls and speckles, and who knows? We don't know yet what we think about all of this, but we'll have.
Well, we love it.
Yes, we do.
Whether anybody else
will or not is another story. And then this is just a fun thing. This is just one of our recent crosses of a red by a raspberry. And these are 6 seedlings we got from it. None of them have been selected yet, though we're going to evaluate all of them. It's just totally surprising how much variation we got out of the cross. We've got that guy with the brown style arms. We've got this wonderful, almost black raspberry with
blue style
arms and ruffles. This guy who's overlapping petals, and this guy who's almost just so simple. He's just beautiful. And so I had just learned how to do screenshots, which I never knew how to do before. And we had put all the parents starting down here in this corner. These are the 2 parents, and then these are all the grandparents and great grandparents, and everything zigzagging back across all the way back up here to 48-3. And we just loved seeing all the colors and all the things that had happened to these irises over time. And then I have one more little spiel at the end, which is my own personal feeling about Siberians, which is the thing I love about them is that there's so much variety in them, and in our Siberian Iris Society, We don't have rules that say everything has to be huge, everything has to be this size. Everything that's attractive and well-grown is acceptable. And so we have very simple flowers like this in Siberians. We have very ornate flowers like this in Siberians. We have little tiny flowers like this one, and big flowers like this one. These are all in diploid Siberians, not in tetraploidy at all. The variety that's possible is amazing. And one day I went out into our field and I just collected a bunch of different irises and put them here on this pad. And I just couldn't believe the differences. So this is probably the biggest
Probably.
seedling we have. And this is the littlest one that we have. This one is called Siliousness. And I think it's always important to remember that even little tiny flowers can produce absolutely wonderful displays. It's never just about size. It's all about how the plant grows and how it shows off in the garden. So that's us. That's what we have to do. And if you want to do questions, we could, but whatever you want to do.
I do have a couple. I want to say thank you. Oh my gosh, I wrote down so many varieties. This is how I got started with daylilies myself. I don't hybridize, but oh my gosh, it's just, I'm not sure where to look first. So I really liked the ones with a lot of the different veining colors. But I do in the chats, we do have how many years from seed to flower?
Okay, it's a seed, the first year, a seedling. So you plant the seed, next year it sprouts and it grows. About 25% of them will bloom the next year. So that's a 2-year cycle. But all the rest of them will
Definitely bloom the
the
third
third
year.
year.
And if you do what some people do, which we don't, you do funny things in the wintertime and try to get them to sprout early. We just stratify our seeds outside and they come up in May. But if you could get them to sprout in your basement or something in January, then they would all probably bloom the next year. So it's not quite like peonies or daffodils or lilies or some of the things where you wait forever, which is very nice.
Awesome. Awesome.
I don't know about daylilies. How quickly do you go from seed to flower in a daylily?
About well, somebody can correct me, I'm sure, in our group, but I would say probably about the same, about the second year, but 3 years to get a decent flower. And then they have to assess, it's almost 5 years before I think you register in general to make
Right.
sure that the stats are correct.
And the other thing that happens, the first year you see a flower on a seedling Siberian, it's a look into the future, but you're not really sure. I would say 80% of them get better, stronger as the years go by, develop more buds per stalk. Every once in a while, something you saw as a first year, you think it's going to be the greatest thing ever, and then it goes backwards from there. So you have to be prepared. The other thing I would like to say is that even though when you do a program like this, it sort of looks like everything is very, straightforward, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And it really isn't like that. There are thousands of seedlings being looked at, all of which is great fun, but there's a lot of rejections and things you look at and say, not quite so good, and you go on to the next one and that sort of thing. So it isn't quite as straightforward as sometimes it looks.
Okay. You do still have a couple of questions. What zone are you up in Massachusetts?
We used to be zone 5, and we're probably now, we used to be sort of a cold 5 and then a warm 5, and now I'd say we're getting close to being a cold 6.
Okay. And does the Siberian, because I do know we have somebody from Clemson on, what's the actual range for the Siberians?
Well, they need to have cold in the winter. So if your ground gets cold, they'll be fine. So we do have people in Virginia, North Carolina.
We have it in Southern California.
There's one, people in Northern California are
Right.
working at it and they do pretty well. But I would say if you're in a place where you really never get the ground cold, it's going to be hard.
All right. Someone did ask if you are open to the public or to master gardener groups.
What I would say is we are not a bit, I mean, we have a mail order business, but we're not a business like you can come here and buy anything. But we absolutely are, we're a Siberian display garden and we welcome people to come visit and walk through the garden. We love to have visitors.
So
Okay.
we start around Memorial Day and go for 2 or 3 weeks.
The
Okay.
Siberian season is kind of late May into the first 2 or 3 weeks of June. But if people came in mid-May, they'd see a whole bunch of other species irises. And if they came later, they'd see some other things. So there are irises blooming here pretty much from the 1st of May or earlier until
July,
mid-July.
mid-July.
Okay. Because yes, because you said you also grow others, not just the Siberians.
Right, right. We grow other species and we grow some Japanese, not a lot, but some, mostly because they need extra water and
We're sandy.
we're sandy.
You're sandy too. Okay. Ryan asked, do you hybridize other genre or just, well, iris relatives, which I think you answered, but Bellum canda and Pardenopsis?
Pardenopsis,
Pardenopsis.
which is Pardenopsis actually have been reclassified as irises, believe it or not.
As a bellum.
As has Bellum canda. It's now, Bellum canda is now Iris domestica of all the
Really?
unfortunate botanical names.
And Pardenopsis has gone back to Iris.
Dichotoma.
Iris dichotoma.
But we do hybrid. In the past, we've done some work with Iris cristata, though not lately. And we did quite a bit of work hybridizing Iris versicolor, which is our native New England blue flag. But as far as other genera, we've done a little bit of work in primroses and played around with a few other things. We do a lot of growing things from seed here that we don't ever introduce, that we just grow and have for ourselves.
Amaranth is one of them.
You know, including a lot of annuals that we really enjoy. So
Zinnias.
we're playing around with different color strains of zinnias and things like that. But irises are our main.
Okay. And if you could, for some reason, I can't seem to get over to my, to give your website so that the people are asking on the chat.
Oh, okay. It's JPW flowers.com. The name of our business, oddly enough, is Joe Pyeweed's Garden, because when we started out, we picked a lot of Joe Pyeweed in the wild because we had no land of our own to grow on. So we're jpwflowers.com.
And I couldn't remember because I knew what your email was, but it didn't.
Yeah, right.
If it could transfer it over.
That's right.
I want to say this is wonderful. I don't know, Mike or Patty, I think we were playing around trying to mute people and I think I muted everybody. So I apologize if I unmuted you or muted you. So I just want to, I don't know if anybody has anything else they'd like to ask in the chats as we're about to 8:15, almost 8:20. And I'm just trying to see if anybody else is popping up. Do you need a specialized tool to hybridize? That somebody else was asking.
Marty likes to use a reverse action tweezer. Some people use toothpicks. Anybody who's really interested in hybridizing should email us and we'll try to tell you how to do it. In terms of the actual pollinating part, you know, where to put the pollen and how to do it. We can talk with you. We're always happy to do that.
It's actually pretty easy to do.
Okay. And Joan, it was jpwflowers@gmail.com.
AOL.com is our email.
but it's just .com.
Yeah.
jpwflowers.com is our
Is the website, and
website.
our email is on the website, so people could find that
Because we're
there.
asking that too. And then I know the last, we are recording this for somebody that asked, but the last question, do you have a catalog? Do you have, again, we're trying not to endorse as a
Right.
Rutgers, but is there any catalogs or places that just a search that you
If
find?
you went, I mean, one of the best places to go there, the American Iris Society has a Siberian group called the Siberian section, and they have you could just go to the American Iris Society website and they would send you to the Siberian section website. I think it's siberianirises.org. But on that website, they have a whole list of maybe 10 or 12 Siberian nurseries around the
Okay.
country.
Excellent.
There are some really good ones, and they're all on there, or people can email me and I can tell them what the other Siberian nurseries are. We pretty much only carry our own irises, and there are lots of other wonderful irises, and I would encourage people to try different hybridizers things. So I'm sure if you find your way to that list, or somebody writes to me, I can send you the list.
The other thing is we can include that when we send out the recording. So anybody that had registered for the
I could
talk,
send it to you. Yeah.
yep, we can make sure it gets out that way. And I didn't even think the Siberian or the Iris Society would be perfect because it's, again, putting in everybody. Oh, somebody put it in
Right.
the chat. Thank you, Ryan. Northern Rock Garden Societies have a great seed bank for species iris. So Ryan had put that in the chat. So I just want to thank you again. I mean, I do have, now that I'm thinking, I saw butter and sugar. I actually have that one. And I
Okay.
have Cape Cod boys, I think. I did pick
Cape
those
Cod
up last year.
boys.
So
Yep.
so they were two of my forays into that last year. I was kind of getting into something new. So I really appreciate that you were able to come on. I don't know if Patty or anybody else would like to jump in there, but thank you so much. It was a wonderful, just a look at how different from blue, white, and purple to come
Yep.
out with all these colors. Just amazing.
It was a surprise to us and really fun.
It's like a birthday present every day. You didn't know what was
Yes,
coming
it
out.
is. It absolutely is. Thank
But yeah,
everybody. I thank you to everybody who came and listened, and I think we'll sign off.
We will sign off. So thank you guys again,
Thank
and
you.
everybody
Thank
online.
you.
We will be in touch.
Wonderful talk.
Chat.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay. I have to find my button to turn everybody off.